The seat was paid for, the boarding pass was printed, the law was on his side. But when the senior flight attendant sneered at the quiet man in seat 1A, demanded he move to the back of the plane to accommodate a platinum VIP, she made the most expensive mistake in the history of Horizon Apex Airlines. She saw a man she thought she could bully. She didn't realize she was looking at the one man with the legal power to ground every single one of their jets. They wanted a seat. He was about to take their entire fleet. The chaos of JFK International Airport usually stopped at the threshold of the first-class cabin, and for Julian Vance, that silence was worth every cent of the $7,000 ticket. Julian adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke charcoal suit, settled into the plush leather of Seat 1A, and exhaled. He wasn't a man who sought attention. At 42, with grey just beginning to dust his temples, he had the unassuming demeanor of a community college professor or perhaps a tired accountant. He didn't wear a flashy Rolex. His watch was a vintage Patek Philippe with a worn leather strap, expensive, but only to those who knew what they were looking at. He didn't shout into his phone or demand champagne the moment his shoes hit the carpet. He simply wanted to go home. He opened his briefcase, a battered, tan leather satchel that had seen more courtrooms than most judges, and pulled out a thick file labeled Apex Meridian Merger, Liability Audit. He placed it on the tray table, put on his reading glasses, and began to review the fine print. "Excuse me, sir." The voice was sticky sweet, the kind of tone that barely concealed a razor blade of irritation beneath the customer service veneer. Julian didn't look up immediately. He finished marking a paragraph with his red pen, then slowly raised his eyes. Standing over him was the lead flight attendant. Her name tag read Patricia, and her smile didn't reach her eyes. She was tapping a manicured fingernail against the top of his seat. "Yes?" Julian asked, his voice calm, a deep baritone that usually commanded respect in boardrooms. "I'm afraid there's been a bit of a mix-up with the manifest," Patricia said. She didn't look sorry. She looked expectant. "We're going to need to reaccommodate you." Julian blinked. "Reaccommodate? I have my boarding pass right here. Seat 1A. I checked in 3 hours ago." "Yes, I understand that," Patricia said, her tone dropping the sweetness now, leaning into pure efficiency. "However, we have a priority VIP situation. A platinum-tier partner is flying with us last minute, and company policy dictates we accommodate their seating preferences. He prefers the bulkhead window." "This seat." Julian looked around the cabin. It was a Boeing 777, configured with only 8 first-class suites. They were all full, save for the one next to him, 1B. 1B is empty, Julian noted, gesturing to the aisle seat. "He can sit there." Patricia sighed, a loud, theatrical exhale through her nose. "Sir, Mr. Sterling does not sit in aisle seats. He requires privacy. We need you to move to seat 1B so Mr. Sterling can have 1A. Actually," she glanced at her tablet, "I'm seeing that 1B is now assigned to his personal assistant. We're going to need to move you back to business, or potentially premium economy, depending on availability." Julian closed his file slowly. The red pen clicked as he capped it. "Let me understand this correctly," Julian said, turning his body fully to face her. "I paid full fare for this ticket. I am seated. The door is not yet closed. And you are asking me to vacate my paid seat, downgrade my class of service, and potentially move to the back of the plane because another passenger, who arrived late, prefers my window view." "Mr. Sterling is a Diamond Legacy member," Patricia said, as if that explained everything. "It's not just a preference, it's a protocol. We will issue you a voucher for $200 for the inconvenience." $200, Julian repeated. He almost laughed. His billing rate was $1,200 an hour. "Patricia, I'm going to decline your offer. I am comfortable here. Please let Mr. Sterling know he can take the aisle, or he can take the next flight." Patricia's face hardened. The mask fell completely. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Sir, you aren't listening. This isn't a request. This is an operational necessity. If you do not cooperate, I will have to classify you as a disruptive passenger. Do you know what happens then?" Julian's eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you threatening me with federal removal for sitting in my assigned seat?" "I am telling you that Mr. Sterling is boarding in 2 minutes," Patricia snapped. "And he will be sitting in 1A. You can walk back to row 12 on your own legs, or security can drag you off the plane entirely. It's your choice." It was a bluff. Julian knew the FAA regulations better than he knew his own children's birthdays, mostly because he didn't have children, but he did have a photographic memory for Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations. Specifically, he knew that involuntary denial of boarding or downgrading after a passenger was already seated required specific written notices and compensation far exceeding $200. But more importantly, he knew who owned the plane. "I'll stay right here," Julian said softly, reopening his file. Patricia turned on her heel, her face flushed with anger. "We'll see about that." She stormed toward the cockpit, presumably to get the captain involved. Julian watched her go, then looked down at the document on his tray. It was a liability assessment for Horizon Apex Airlines. Specifically, it was a risk analysis regarding their insurance coverage for their transatlantic fleet. He pulled out his phone. He sent a single text message to a contact saved simply as Reynolds. Oversight. Text, JFK to LHR, Flight 882. Potential violation of CFR 250.2b in progress. Also, check the leasing agreement on tail number N8884HA. Who holds the lien? He put the phone away. The curtain at the front of the cabin whipped open. The man who entered the first-class cabin didn't just walk. He strutted. He was young, perhaps 25, wearing a tracksuit that cost more than most people's cars. Gucci, covered in logos. He had oversized sunglasses on, despite being indoors, and was loudly chewing gum. This was Carter Sterling. Julian recognized him instantly, not from law books, but from the tabloids scattered in the airport lounge. Carter was the son of a tech mogul, a social media entrepreneur whose primary talent seemed to be wrecking Lamborghinis and getting kicked out of nightclubs in Dubai. Behind him trailed a beleaguered-looking assistant carrying 3 massive shopping bags and a small, trembling dog in a designer carrier. Carter stopped at row 1, looked at his boarding pass, looked at Julian, and then pulled his sunglasses down the bridge of his nose. "Yo," Carter said, his voice loud enough to wake the passengers in business class. "You're in my spot, old man." Julian didn't look up from his file. "I believe you have the wrong seat, son." "Check your pass." "I don't check passes," Carter scoffed. "I told them I wanted 1A. This is 1A. Why are you still here? Didn't that lady tell you to beat it?" Patricia reappeared, looking flustered, but reinforced by the presence of a tall, burly man in a yellow vest, the gate agent supervisor, accompanied by 2 airport police officers who looked bored and tired. "Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry for the delay," Patricia cooed, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness again. "We're handling the situation right now." She turned her glare on Julian. "Sir, this is your final warning. The captain has authorized your removal if you do not comply with crew instructions." Julian closed his file again. He looked at the police officers. "Officers, I have a valid ticket. I have not been disruptive. I am being asked to move to accommodate a late-arriving passenger based on his status. which is a violation of the airline's contract of carriage, Section 4, Paragraph 2. If you touch me, you are assisting in an unlawful eviction from a commercial vessel." The older cop, a man named Sergeant Miller, looked at Patricia. "Is that true? Did he pay for the seat?" "It doesn't matter," Patricia snapped. "The captain wants him moved. That makes it a flight safety issue. He is refusing a direct order from the flight crew." "I'm not refusing a safety order," Julian corrected calmly. "I am refusing a commercial preference request. There is a distinction." "Just get him out of here," Carter Sterling shouted, throwing his hands up. "I have a live stream in 10 minutes. I need the window light. My followers are waiting. Do you know who my dad is? He knows the CEO of this dumpy airline." "Sir," the gate supervisor stepped in, puffing out his chest. "We need to close the doors. You are delaying the flight. If you don't move to seat 12F right now, we will deplane you and ban you from Horizon Apex for life." Julian looked at the supervisor. 12F. That's a middle seat in Economy Plus. You want me to trade a $7,000 suite for a middle seat? "Take it or leave it," the supervisor sneered. Carter Sterling laughed, pulling out his phone and aiming the camera at Julian. "Look at this boomer, guys, refusing to move for the king. This is what happens when broke people try to fly, Lux. Get him off." Julian looked at the phone camera, then at Patricia, then at the police. He stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't fight. He simply stood up, smoothed his suit jacket, and picked up his briefcase. "Fine," Julian said. The cabin went silent. The sudden compliance seemed to shock them. "I will not move to seat 12F. I will deplane. But I want it noted on the record that I was involuntarily denied boarding despite holding a valid ticket, solely to accommodate Mr. Sterling." Yeah, noted, whatever," Patricia said, waving her hand dismissively, relieved she had won. "Just go." "I'll need my luggage offloaded," Julian said. "That will take too long," the supervisor argued. "We'll ship it to you." "No," Julian said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming ice cold. "Federal regulations prohibit a plane from taking off with luggage that does not match a passenger on board. Unless you want a security violation on top of a civil rights suit, you will pull my bags. I'll wait on the jet bridge." He walked past Carter Sterling, who was snickering. "Bye-bye, Grandpa," Carter jeered. "Go fly cargo." Julian paused next to Carter. He leaned in slightly. "Enjoy the seat, Mr. Sterling. I hope you get comfortable. It's going to be a very long time before this plane goes anywhere." Julian walked off the plane and on to the jet bridge. He didn't stop at the gate desk to argue for a voucher. He walked straight to a quiet corner of the terminal, sat down, and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. It wasn't customer service. "Hello?" A crisp voice answered on the second ring. "Eleanor," Julian said. "It's Julian Vance. I need you to patch me through to the Director of Operations for Horizon Apex, and get the FAA Eastern Region Director on the line. Use the emergency warrant line." "Julian?" Eleanor sounded surprised. "What's wrong? Is there a crash?" "Not yet," Julian said, watching through the glass as the jet bridge pulled away from the plane. "But I'm about to crash their stock price. Initiate a Level 4 compliance hold on Horizon Apex Flight 882. And Eleanor?" "Yes?" "Pull the leasing file on that aircraft. If I recall correctly, the underwriting firm for that jet is Vance and Associates." "That's your firm, Julian." "Exactly," Julian said. "I want to repossess the plane. Now." Inside the terminal, the air was recycled and stale, a stark contrast to the filtered, humidified luxury Julian had just been expelled from. He sat on a hard plastic chair near gate B12, his laptop open on his knees, his phone pressed to his ear. To the passing travelers, he looked like just another businessman dealing with a delayed spreadsheet. They had no idea he was currently dismantling a multi-billion-dollar corporation's logistics network with the precision of a surgeon cutting an artery. "Connect me to the seizing agent in New York," Julian said calmly into the phone, "and get the Port Authority liaison on the line. I want the writ of attachment served electronically to the cockpit within 3 minutes." On the other end of the line, Eleanor, his paralegal and right-hand operative, was typing furiously. "Julian, are you sure about this? Initiating the default event clause on the master lease is nuclear. You're citing operational gross negligence because they bumped you." "I'm citing a violation of the good faith covenant," Julian corrected, watching the sleek Boeing 747 push back from the window. They removed a seated passenger to accommodate a personal favor for a non-equity partner. That demonstrates a failure of management control. If they can't manage a seating chart, we can argue they can't manage the maintenance logs. It's a breach of the risk profile. And since Vance and Associates represents the consortium of banks that actually owns that physical airplane, we are revoking their right to operate it. He paused, watching the plane's navigation lights blink. "The asset is at risk, Eleanor. Repossess it." Meanwhile, on board Flight 882, the atmosphere was jubilant, at least in Seat 1A. Carter Sterling had reclined the seat fully, kicking his designer sneakers up against the bulkhead wall, a strict violation of the rules, but Patricia didn't say a word. She was too busy pouring him a glass of Dom Perignon before the plane had even reached the runway. "Finally," Carter sighed, snapping a selfie with the champagne flute, making sure the first-class logo was visible. He posted it immediately to his 3 million followers with the caption, "They tried to keep the king down, but I always win. Jet set, Alpha, move over." "Is everything to your liking, Mr. Sterling?" Patricia asked, hovering nervously. She was still adrenaline shaky from the confrontation with Julian. There was a nagging feeling in her gut, a cold weight she couldn't quite displace. The man's calmness had been unnatural. Most people screamed. Most people threatened to sue. That man had just accepted it. And the way he had looked at the plane as he left, like a repo man looking at a car with missed payments. "It's fine." Carter dismissed her without looking up. "But the Wi-Fi is slow. Fix it." "We're still on the ground, sir. It will speed up once we reach 10,000 feet. "Whatever. Just get me more nuts, the warmed ones, and make sure no one from economy uses the front bathroom. I hate seeing poor people walk past me." "Of course, sir." Patricia forced a smile and retreated to the galley. She pulled the curtain shut and let out a breath. The supervisor, a man named Greg, was in the galley filling out paperwork. "We got the bag off?" Patricia asked. "Yeah," Greg grunted. "Just barely. Ramp guys were pissed. Had to reopen the cargo hold. Delayed us 10 minutes. Captain wasn't happy." "Who was that guy anyway?" Patricia asked, pouring herself a water with trembling hands. "He acted like he owned the place." Greg shrugged. "Manifest just said, Vance J. Paid full fare cash. Probably some nobody consultant who thinks he's important. Don't worry about it, Pat. You made the right call. Carter Sterling's dad is CEO of Sterling Tech. They have a corporate contract with Apex worth $20 million a year. If the kid wants the window, the kid gets the window. That other guy, we'll send him a voucher and he'll go away. They always do." The plane lurched forward, beginning the long taxi to the active runway. The safety video began to play. The engines whined as they spooled up, that deep, powerful vibration that usually signaled the start of a long journey across the Atlantic. Inside the cockpit, Captain Anderson and First Officer Lewis were running through the pre-flight checklist. "Flaps set to 15, Lewis said. "Checked," Anderson replied. "V speeds entered. We are looking good. Tower has cleared us to queue behind the Delta Airbus." "Strange," Lewis muttered, tapping the flight management computer. What is it? ACAR's message just popped up. It's not from dispatch. It's from the FAA. Anderson frowned. The FAA? What do they want? It's a priority code. Code Red 7. Captain Anderson went pale. Code Red 7 wasn't a weather warning or a reroute. It was a grounded status code usually reserved for aircraft with critical mechanical failures or security threats. Read it, Anderson commanded. Lewis squinted at the screen, his confusion growing by the second. It says, Immediate Stop Order. Registration N884HA. Invalidated. Operating certificate suspended by lineholder. Return to gate immediately. Do not take off. Repeat. Do not take off. Federal agents en route. Anderson stared at the screen. Lineholder. The bank? Why would the bank ground a plane mid-taxi? Captain. Lewis's voice was tight. Tower is calling us. The radio crackled to life, losing its usual rhythmic calm and replaced by a sharp, urgent tone. Apex 882, Kennedy Tower. Cancel takeoff clearance. I repeat, cancel takeoff clearance. You are ordered to hold position immediately on taxiway Bravo. Do not proceed. Tower. Apex 882, Anderson replied, his heart hammering against his ribs. We are holding. What is the problem? We are green across the board. Apex 882, we have been served a federal ground stop order regarding your tail number. We have been informed that you are operating a stolen vessel. Anderson's jaw dropped. Stolen? This is a commercial airliner. We've been flying this jet for 6 years. Take it up with the lawyers, 882. Ground control is directing you to a holding pad. You are not cleared to return to the terminal yet. Law enforcement is securing the perimeter. Await instructions. The plane shuddered as Anderson slammed on the brakes. The sudden stop threw the cabin crew forward in the aisles. In seat 1A, Carter Sterling spilled his champagne all over his Gucci tracksuit. The sudden braking sent a ripple of panic through the cabin. In economy, weary travelers looked around nervously. In first class, Carter Sterling was screaming. What the hell? Carter yelled, jumping up and shaking his wet tracksuit. This is vintage! You idiot driver! I'm going to sue this entire airline! Patricia unbuckled and rushed to him, grabbing a towel. Mr. Sterling, please sit down. The seatbelt sign is still on. Why did we stop? Carter demanded, shoving the towel away. Why aren't we flying? The intercom chimed. It wasn't the usual, folks, just a little traffic announcement. It was the captain, and he sounded shaken. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We have been ordered by air traffic control to stop the aircraft. We have a bit of an administrative issue regarding the paperwork for the flight. We are waiting for further instructions. Please remain seated. Paperwork? Carter laughed incredulously. We stopped for paperwork? Do you know who I am? Tell them to do the paperwork later. Patricia ignored him, her headset buzzing. It was the captain calling the purser station. She picked it up. Patricia, we have a major problem, Captain Anderson hissed. Who did we kick off the plane? What? Patricia blinked. Just some passenger, Mr. Vance. Why? Because, the captain's voice was trembling with suppressed rage. I just got a message from operations. The man we kicked off, Julian Vance, is the senior managing partner of Vance and Associates. Patricia, do you know who Vance and Associates is? A law firm? They are the owners of the Aircraft Trust, Anderson shouted, losing his composure. They hold the mortgage on this specific Boeing 777. And because we denied him boarding in violation of the contract, he has declared the airline in default of the lease. He just legally repossessed the plane, while we are sitting on the tarmac. Patricia felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at the empty seat 1B, where Julian had been sitting quietly. She remembered his calmness, She remembered the text message he sent. "I want to repossess the plane." "He can't do that," Patricia stammered. "It's $1 billion company. He's just one man." "He just did it," Anderson snapped. "And now the Port Authority police are surrounding the jet because, technically, I am now flying a stolen aircraft. Secure the cabin. We aren't going to London. We're going to jail if we don't handle this right." Patricia dropped the handset. She looked at Carter Sterling, who was loudly berating the assistant in 1B about his wet pants. She looked out the window. Flashing blue and red lights were visible in the distance, racing across the tarmac. Not one police car, 10, and 2 black SUVs with federal plates. Inside the terminal, Julian watched the spectacle from the floor-to-ceiling windows. He was no longer alone. 2 airport police officers, the same ones who had escorted him off, were standing nearby, looking confused. A man in a sharp blue suit came running up to Julian, breathless. It was the station manager for Horizon Apex, a man named Mr. Henderson. He looked like he was having a heart attack. "Mr. Vance!" Henderson gasped, skidding to a halt. "Mr. Vance, please, you have to call them off." Julian didn't look up from his laptop. He was typing an email to the airline's board of directors. "Mr. Henderson, good of you to join us. I assume you've received the writ of attachment. Sir, you've grounded a transatlantic flight. You've stranded 300 passengers. This is insane." "No," Julian said, closing his laptop and standing up slowly. "Insanity is your flight crew removing the lead underwriter of your insurance policy from his seat to please a social media influencer. That is insanity. What I have done is purely business. I have identified a risk, management incompetence, and I have taken steps to secure the collateral. We can fix this," Henderson pleaded, sweating profusely. "I can get you on the next flight. I'll upgrade you. I'll give you a refund." Julian smiled, but it was a shark's smile. "Mr. Henderson, you seem to think this is about a seat. It stopped being about a seat the moment your flight attendant threatened me with federal removal. This is now about the viability of your airline's contract." Julian pointed out the window. The Boeing 777 was surrounded by police cars. A mobile stairway was being driven up to the plane, but not to the passenger door. It was going to the cockpit. "Right now," Julian said, checking his watch. "Federal marshals are serving Captain Anderson with a cease and desist order. The engines will be shut down. The passengers will be deplaned. And that aircraft? It's not going anywhere until my firm conducts a full audit of your entire fleet's compliance with passenger rights regulations. That usually takes 3 to 4 weeks. 3 weeks? Henderson choked. That plane generates $200,000 of revenue a day. You're costing us millions. And my hourly rate is $1,200, Julian said coldly. But you wouldn't pay the $200 voucher, so here we are. What do you want? Henderson whispered, defeated. I want to go back on board, Julian said simply. I want my seat back. Seat 1A. And I want the person currently sitting in it removed. And I want the staff member who authorized my removal to explain to the federal agents why she filed a false report about a disruptive passenger. Henderson stared at him. That's it? For now, Julian said. But you better hurry. The marshals are about to arrest your pilot for operating a vehicle without the owner's consent. Henderson grabbed his radio. Get the mobile stairs to the main cabin. Get Patricia on the line. And get that Sterling kid off the plane now. Back on the plane, the situation had deteriorated into chaos. The engines spooled down with a whining groan, plunging the cabin into eerie silence, broken only by the murmur of confused passengers. Suddenly, the main cabin door opened. It wasn't a jet bridge. It was the open air of the tarmac. 3 men in windbreakers, stamped U.S. Marshal, boarded the plane. Patricia stepped forward, her professional mask crumbling. Can I help you?" "We are looking for a Carter Sterling," the lead marshal announced, his voice booming through the first-class cabin. Carter popped his head up, grinning. "Finally! Security. Are you here to escort me off this broke-ass plane? Get me a private jet." The marshal walked up to seat 1A. He didn't smile. "Carter Sterling? That's me, the one and only. Stand up, sir. Grab your bags." "Where are we going? VIP lounge?" Carter asked, standing up and grabbing his dog carrier. "You are being detained for trespassing on a federally regulated vessel," the marshal said, grabbing Carter's arm. "And we need to clear this seat. The legal owner is waiting to board." "Trespassing?" Carter shrieked as the marshal yanked him into the aisle. "I have a ticket. I'm a Diamond member." "Your ticket was invalidated 10 minutes ago when the flight was cancelled," the marshal said. "Move." As they dragged a protesting, screaming Carter Sterling toward the door, Patricia shrank back against the galley wall, trying to make herself invisible. The lead marshal stopped and looked at her. "Are you the purser?" "Patricia." She nodded, unable to speak. "The station manager wants to see you on the tarmac. Bring your badge. You won't be needing it for the return flight." Patricia felt the tears welling up. She watched as Carter was hauled down the stairs, his screams of, "Do you know who my father is?" fading into the noise of the airport. Then she saw him, walking up the stairs, calm, collected, carrying his battered leather briefcase. Julian Vance emerged from the night air, stepping back onto the plane he had just single-handedly grounded. He walked past the stunned flight attendants. He walked past the terrified supervisor. He stopped at seat 1A. He looked at the champagne stain on the leather. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, wiped it off fastidiously, and sat down. He looked up at the marshal. "Thank you, Deputy. I believe the aircraft is secure now." "Yes, Mr. Vance." The marshal nodded respectfully. "We've cleared the unauthorized occupants." Julian looked at Patricia. She was trembling, holding her badge in her hand. "Patricia," Julian said, his voice level. "I believe you mentioned something about a disruptive passenger earlier. I'm happy to report the disruption has been removed." He opened his briefcase, pulled out the file, and put on his glasses. "Now," Julian said, "I believe I was promised a glass of water." The tarmac at JFK was windswept and cold, a stark industrial landscape of concrete and jet fuel fumes that felt 1,000,000 miles away from the warm, champagne-scented bubble of the first-class cabin. For Patricia, the walk down the mobile stairs felt like a descent into hell. She wasn't just walking away from Flight 882, she was walking away from a 20-year career. The station manager, Mr. Henderson, didn't even look at her as she reached the bottom of the stairs. He was too busy frantically typing on his BlackBerry, trying to calculate the cost of the delay. Beside him stood a representative from Human Resources, a woman Patricia had only seen in training videos, holding a clipboard and a clear plastic bag for Patricia's badge. "Patricia," the HR representative said, her voice devoid of sympathy, "we need your ID and your airport access card, immediately." "But I was just following protocol," Patricia stammered, her hands shaking as she unpinned the silver wings from her uniform blazer. "The priority passenger policy. Mr. Sterling is a Diamond legacy." "The policy," Mr. Henderson cut in, finally looking up with eyes full of fury, "does not authorize you to violate federal aviation regulations regarding involuntary denial of boarding, and it certainly does not authorize you to threaten a senior legal partner of our primary leasing bank with police action. You didn't just bump a passenger, Patricia. You triggered a default clause in our fleet insurance. Do you know what the deductible is on a repossessed 777? Patricia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It's $5 million, Henderson spat. "And that's just the paperwork fee. You are terminated for cause, Effective immediately. Gross negligence and misconduct. Hand over the badge. She dropped the plastic card into the bag. It made a small, final click. Behind her, the massive engines of the Boeing 787 began to whine again, restarting for the second time that night. She watched through blurred vision as the mobile stairs were pulled away. She saw the warm glow of the windows. In Sat 1A, she could just make out the silhouette of Julian Vance, reading his file, calm and untouched by the wreckage he had left in his wake. Inside the terminal, things were going even worse for Carter Sterling. The holding cell at the Port Authority precinct was nothing like the VIP lounges Carter was used to. It smelled of bleach and despair. He had been stripped of his shoelaces, his belt, and, most devastatingly, his phone. "I need my lawyer!" Carter screamed for the 10th time, kicking the metal bench. "My dad is Richard Sterling. He owns Sterling Tech. He's going to buy this airport and turn it into a parking lot." The desk sergeant, a veteran officer named O'Malley, who had seen everything from drug mules to drunk senators, didn't even look up from his paperwork. "Sit down, kid. Your dad isn't here. And even if he was, he can't unbreak federal law. You interfered with a flight crew and trespassed on a secure aircraft after being ordered to deplane. That's a felony." "I didn't trespass," Carter whined. "I was in my seat. It wasn't your seat," O'Malley said calmly. "It belonged to the bank, and the bank said, 'Get out.'" Back on Flight 882, the atmosphere was thick with a terrified reverence. The new lead flight attendant, a woman named Sarah who had been pulled from standby, served Julian with the precision of a bomb disposal expert. She placed a glass of sparkling water on his linen coaster, as if she were handling nitroglycerin. "Mr. Vance," she whispered, "is the temperature to your liking?" Julian looked up over his reading glasses. He saw the fear in her eyes. He sighed. He wasn't a monster. He was just a man who believed in contracts. "It's perfect, Sarah." "Thank you," Julian said, offering a small, genuine smile. "And please relax. I'm not going to sue you for pouring the water from the wrong side. Just treat me like a normal passenger. That's all I ever asked for." Sarah exhaled, her shoulders dropping an inch. "Yes, sir. Captain Anderson asked me to convey his deepest apologies. He said he was misinformed by the ground staff." "Tell Captain Anderson that as long as we arrive in London on time, I have no quarrel with him," Julian said. "He was protecting his ship. I respect that. I was just protecting mine." He went back to his file. The plane taxied out, smoother this time. As they roared down the runway and lifted into the night sky over New York, Julian didn't look out the window at the receding city. He turned the page of his document. He had 8 hours to prepare for the meeting in London. And now that he had successfully demonstrated the airline's vulnerability, he had a new clause to add to the merger agreement: management restructuring. He wasn't just flying to London for a meeting. He was flying to fire the CEO. London was grey and rainy when Flight 882 touched down at Heathrow, but the storm brewing in the corporate offices of Horizon Apex was far more violent. By the time Julian Vance walked through the sliding glass doors of the arrivals hall, his phone had reconnected to the network. It vibrated instantly, engaging in a continuous angry buzz that lasted for a full minute. Emails, voicemails, news alerts. He ignored them all. He walked past the chauffeur holding a sign for Mr. Sterling, who was clearly not coming, and found his own driver, a stoic man named Arthur who had driven him for 10 years. "Good flight, sir?" Arthur asked, taking the battered briefcase. "Eventful, Arthur," Julian said, sliding into the back of the Mercedes S-Class. "Take me to the Shard, the Horizon Apex European headquarters." "Not the hotel first, sir? To freshen up?" "No." Julian checked his watch. It was 8 a.m. in London. The markets open in an hour. I want to be sitting in the CEO's chair before the opening bell rings." While Julian navigated London traffic, the internet was exploding. Carter Sterling, before his phone was confiscated, had managed to upload one last video. It was the clip of Julian refusing to move, with Carter's mocking commentary. "Look at this boomer refusing to respect the VIPs," entitled. But the internet is a fickle beast. Carter had expected his followers to rally behind him. He expected them to mock the old guy in the suit. He was wrong. A TikTok user named Law Eagle, a legal analyst with 5 million followers, had stitched Carter's video. "What you are seeing here," the analyst said in the video, pointing to Julian's calm demeanor, "is the difference between new money and real power. That boomer isn't just a passenger. That is Julian Vance. He is the head of aviation litigation at Vance & Associates. He literally wrote the textbook on airline liability. Carter Sterling is mocking a man who could buy his father's company with a signature. And look at the body language. Vance isn't arguing. He's waiting. That's the face of a man who knows he's about to checkmate you in 3 moves." The comment section was a bloodbath for Carter. Imagine bragging about stealing a seat and then getting arrested. Carter Sterling just found out that platinum status doesn't beat federal law. "I work for Apex. We got a memo this morning. The whole management team is freaking out. Apparently, this guy almost repossessed the whole fleet." The hashtag "Suck the Quiet Man" started trending. People were cheering for Julian, the stoic suit who stood up to the bratty influencer and the corporate bully. But Julian didn't care about hashtags. He cared about the boardroom on the 45th floor of the Shard. He walked into the conference room at 8:45 a.m. The room was filled with terrified executives. At the head of the table sat Marcus Thorne, the CEO of Horizon Apex. Thorne was a man used to intimidating people. He was large, loud, and aggressive, but today he looked like he hadn't slept. "Julian," Thorne said, standing up, his smile tight and forced. "This is unexpected. We weren't scheduled to meet until tomorrow." "Plans change, Marcus," Julian said softly. He didn't sit down. He walked to the window and looked out at the London skyline. "Just like seating assignments." Thorne winced. "Look, about last night. A terrible misunderstanding. The flight attendant went rogue. We've already fired her. We've issued a formal apology to your firm. We're prepared to offer you lifetime first-class travel on Apex, free of charge." Julian turned from the window. He looked at the table of executives. "Marcus, you still don't get it. You think this is about my ego. You think I'm here to extract a perk because my feelings were hurt." He threw a folder onto the mahogany table. It slid across the polished surface and stopped right in front of Thorne. "That is a notice of material breach of contract," Julian said. "Your airline's operational reliability rating just dropped below the threshold required by our lending covenants. The incident last night, removing a seated passenger for a non-emergency reason, was caught on video. It went viral. Your stock is down 4% in pre-market trading. Investors are spooked. They think your management has lost control of its staff." Thorne opened the folder. His hands were trembling. "Julian, you can't be serious. You're going to call the loans. That would bankrupt us." "I'm not going to call the loans," Julian said. "Not yet. But I am activating the step-in rights clause." The room gasped. Step-in rights meant the lender could effectively take over management decisions to protect their asset. "What do you want?" Thorne whispered. "I want a complete overhaul of your priority passenger protocols," Julian listed, counting on his fingers. "I want an independent ombudsman installed to review all passenger complaints regarding involuntary bumping. I want a public statement admitting that your policy regarding Mr. Sterling was discriminatory and illegal. And? Thorne asked, knowing there was more. And, Julian said, I want the contract with Sterling Tech cancelled. Thorne's eyes widened. Julian, that's a $20 million contract. Richard Sterling will sue us. Let him sue, Julian said calmly. I'll handle the defense. But you cannot have a corporate partner who believes they are above the law. Carter Sterling delayed a transatlantic flight, abused your crew, and damaged your brand. If you keep his father's money, you are endorsing that behavior. Drop them. Today. Thorne looked at his executives. They all looked down. They knew Julian had them by the throat. Fine, Thorne said, defeated. We'll drop Sterling Tech, is that it? One last thing, Julian said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was the voucher Patricia had tried to give him. This voucher for $200, Julian said, placing it gently on the table. It expires in a year. I'd like to exchange it. Exchange it for what? Cash? No, Julian smiled. I'd like to exchange it for a donation. $200,000 to the Legal Aid Society for Travelers. It's a non-profit that helps passengers who can't afford lawyers fight illegal bumping. I want it in my name. Thorne stared at him. $200,000 was a drop in the bucket compared to the Sterling contract, but the symbolism was brutal. It was a humiliation. Done, Thorne rasped. Julian buttoned his jacket. Good. Then we have no problems. I have a merger to finish reviewing. I'll take the conference room down the hall. Please ensure the coffee is hot. He turned to leave. Julian, Thorne called out. Julian paused at the door. Did you really have the marshals ready to arrest my pilot? Julian looked back, his face unreadable. Marcus, I'm a lawyer. I don't make threats. I file motions. Have a good day. As Julian walked out, the phone on the conference table rang. It was Richard Sterling, Carter's father, calling to scream about his son being in jail. Thorne looked at the phone, then at the empty doorway where Julian had stood. He picked up the receiver. Mr. Sterling, Thorne said, his voice finding a new, hard edge. This is Marcus Thorne. We need to talk about your son, and we need to talk about the fact that you are no longer a customer of Horizon Apex. The fallout from Flight 882 didn't just ripple, it crashed like a tsunami, destroying everything in its path. 3 days after the incident, the scene inside the visitation room at the Queens County Criminal Court was far from the VIP lifestyle Carter Sterling was accustomed to. He sat on a bolted-down metal stool, wearing an orange jumpsuit that fit poorly. His Gucci tracksuit was in an evidence locker. His hair was unwashed. When the heavy steel door buzzed open, Carter didn't see his high-priced defense team. He saw his father, Richard Sterling. Richard looked older than he did on magazine covers. His face was grey, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't sit down. He stood on the other side of the glass partition, looking at his son with a mixture of disgust and exhaustion. "Dad!" Carter pressed his hands against the glass. "Finally, get me out of here. The food is garbage and there's no signal. Did you sue them? Did you sue that old guy?" Richard Sterling didn't pick up the phone handset immediately. He just stared. When he finally lifted it, his voice was a dead rasp. "There is no lawsuit, Carter." "What? Why not? He humiliated me. He stole my seat." "He didn't steal your seat," Richard said, his voice rising slightly, echoing in the small booth. "He owned the plane. Do you understand that? You picked a fight with the man who holds the mortgage on the airline. So what? We're rich. Buy the plane." "We aren't rich anymore, Carter." Carter blinked. "What are you talking about?" "The contract with Apex," Richard said, rubbing his temples. "It was the backbone of our Q4 revenue. $20 million a year. They cancelled it yesterday. Cited reputational risk due to association with criminal behavior. The stock tanked. Our board of directors called an emergency meeting this morning. Richard paused, leaning in close to the glass. They voted me out, Carter. I'm no longer CEO of Sterling Tech. They said my failure to control my son was a liability. Carter's mouth fell open, but it was just a seat. It wasn't just a seat, Richard screamed, slamming his hand against the glass, making Carter flinch. It was arrogance. You live-streamed yourself committing a federal crime. You have been charged with interference with flight crew, trespassing, and disorderly conduct. The federal prosecutor wants to make an example of you because the viral video made them look weak. You aren't getting bail, Carter. You're looking at 6 months in federal prison. And I can't help you. I have to spend the rest of my money trying to stay out of bankruptcy court. Richard hung up the phone. He didn't say goodbye. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving his son staring at his reflection in the glass. A king with no kingdom, no followers, and nowhere to go. Across the city, in a small, cramped unemployment office in Queens, the air conditioning was broken. Patricia sat in a plastic chair, clutching a folder of documents. She was number 42. They were currently serving number 18. She checked her phone. No missed calls, no texts from her former colleagues. She had been scrubbed from the group chats. When she had walked out of the airport that night, she thought she could just go to another airline. She had 20 years of experience. She was a senior purser. Surely Delta or United would snap her up. She was wrong. Julian Vance hadn't just sued the airline. He had demanded a compliance audit. Part of that audit involved a review of the Do Not Hire registry for aviation personnel who had violated federal safety regulations. Patricia's name was at the top of the list. She had applied to 4 airlines. All rejected her within an hour. She had applied to a private jet charter company. Rejected. She had even applied to be a ticketing agent for a bus line. Finally, she had called a friend in HR at a rival carrier. "Patricia, I can't talk to you," the friend had whispered. "You're radioactive. The industry is calling it the Vance blacklist. Anyone involved in an involuntary bump that goes viral is unhireable. You're a liability risk. Insurance won't cover any flight you work on." "So what am I supposed to do?" Patricia had sobbed. "I don't know how to do anything else." "I heard the airport Starbucks is hiring shift supervisors," the friend said, before hanging up. Now, sitting in the humid waiting room, Patricia looked at her hands. The manicured nails were gone. She looked at the woman next to her, a tired mother trying to feed a crying baby. Patricia realized with a jolt of horror that she had spent 20 years looking down on people like this, treating them as obstacles to her efficiency. Now she was just another number in the queue, waiting for a seat that might never open. She closed her eyes and saw Julian Vance's face. Calm, quiet, unassuming. She realized too late that true power doesn't scream. True power whispers, and the world trembles. 1 week later, Julian Vance stood at the curb of Heathrow Airport, Terminal 5. He checked his watch. It was time to go home. He walked to the check-in counter. This time there was no line. As soon as he approached, the agent behind the desk stood up straight. A manager appeared from a side door, rushing over. "Mr. Vance," the manager said, breathless. "Welcome back. We have your boarding pass ready. We've pre-cleared you through security. And—" the manager hesitated. "We have blocked off the entire first-class cabin for you. No other passengers will be seated in row 1 or 2. Julian took the boarding pass. He looked at the manager. "That won't be necessary," Julian said. "Sir?" "Release the seats," Julian said. "Sell them to whoever wants to buy them. If there are upgrades available for families or frequent flyers, give them the seats." "But your privacy?" "I don't need privacy," Julian said. picking up his briefcase. "I just need the seat I paid for. Seat 1A. As long as no one asks me to move for an influencer, we'll be fine." He walked through security, the staff parting like the Red Sea. When he boarded the plane, the same Boeing 737 he had grounded, the crew was lined up in the galley. They looked terrified. Julian stopped. He looked at the new purser. "Good evening," Julian said. "I'm Julian. I take my coffee black, and I'll be working for most of the flight. Please don't disturb me unless the plane is on fire." "Yes, Mr. Vance," the purser breathed, relieved. Julian walked to seat 1A. He sat down. He placed his briefcase on the floor. He pulled out the file, now labeled Apex Restructuring, finalized. He looked out the window. The sun was setting over London, casting long shadows across the tarmac. He saw a private jet taxiing nearby, flashy and sleek. He thought of Carter Sterling. He thought of the arrogance of youth and money. He opened his file, uncapped his red pen, and began to work. He was the quiet man in 1A, the man who could ground a fleet with a text message, but to the rest of the world, he was just a lawyer going home. And that was exactly how he liked it. And that is the story of how one quiet man took down an arrogant billionaire's son and an entire corrupt airline without ever raising his voice. It's a brutal reminder that you never truly know who you are talking to. Wealth isn't about wearing Gucci or screaming at staff. Real power is silence, knowledge, and the ability to end the game before the other person even knows they're playing. What do you think? Did Carter and Patricia get what they deserved? Or was Julian's revenge too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of high-flying justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. We have more tales of instant karma and revenge coming next week. Thanks for watching.